You know that moment when your fiction comes to life and punches you in the face? Yeah, I wasn't ready for it. Especially not when the guy I wrote into my steamy little novel turned out to be real and standing on my porch in a leather jacket, looking like he'd crawled right out of my most sinful chapter. It was supposed to be harmless. A college project, a little passion piece for my creative writing class. The whole Omegaverse thing had always been my guilty pleasure. Alpha, Omega, beta dynamics, heat cycles, dominance, all that taboo fantasy stuff. I wrote it under a pseudonym, told myself no one in my small Pennsylvania town would ever connect the dots. And then I wrote him, Ethan Kane, the perfect alpha. Tall, dangerously charming, with eyes that could strip you bare. He was a total fabricationer, so I thought. In the novel, he was engaged to my Omega protagonist, Lucas, who, if I'm being brutally honest, was basically just me in disguise. The plot? Tortured love, betrayal, redemption. The ending? Tragic but beautiful. Until the day the real Ethan Kane knocked on my door. Daniel Gray. His voice was low, rough, the kind of voice that could melt the word no right out of your vocabulary. I nodded, still gripping the coffee mug I'd been drinking from like it was my only weapon. You wrote about me, he said. Not a question. A statement. Somewhere in the back of my brain, my English professor's voice was screaming, "Show. Don't tell." But there was nothing to show except the fact that my knees were threatening to give out. How is that even possible? I asked. Ethan stepped forward, and I caught the faintest trace of cedarwood and something darker like rain-soaked asphalt. You tell me, because you didn't just write about me. You wrote about us. The town of Brookhaven wasn't exactly big on secrets. Once you got on people's radar, you stayed there. My neighbors were probably watching from behind their curtains as Ethan stood there, a living, breathing alpha with the kind of presence that could set off every unspoken hierarchy instinct in my body. My pulse was already a mess, my Omega biology screaming danger and want at the same time. You humiliated me, he said, his voice softer now but no less dangerous. In your book, you made me the villain. Ethan, that wasn't you. It was me, he cut in, down to the scar on my left hand and the way I drink my coffee. He lifted his hand to show me, the pale line across his knuckle matching exactly what I described. So tell me, Daniel, how the hell do you know me? I didn't. At least, I didn't think I did. But the deeper I searched my memory, the more unsettling it became. Vague flashes, dreams, maybe of him standing too close, of his hand at the back of my neck, of a voice saying my name like it was a promise and a warning at once. He leaned against my doorway, blocking out the autumn light. You owe me a chance to clear my name. You wrote the story. Now we're going to rewrite it. Together. I should have slammed the door. I should have told him he was insane. Instead, I heard myself say, "Fine, but you're buying me coffee first." That's how I ended up sitting across from Ethan Kane in the corner booth of the Brookhaven diner. The smell of frying bacon and burnt filter coffee wrapping around us. He watched me like I was a puzzle he was already halfway through solving. So you're an Omega, he said casually, as if talking about the weather. I stiffened. We don't talk about that here. His smile was slow, knowing. We are now. My cheeks burned. Outside of the book, I'd never discussed my designation. In a small town like ours, being an unmated Omega past 25 was basically social heresy. But Ethan didn't say it with pity. He said it like it was a challenge. We talked or argued, really, for over an hour. Every time I tried to keep it light, he dragged it deeper. Every time I dodged, he cornered me with another pointed question. And damn it, every time he smiled, my chest tightened in a way I didn't want to admit. When we finally left, the late afternoon sun was painting the town gold. He walked me back to my porch, and for a moment we just stood there, the air between us heavy with all the things we weren't saying. Then he stepped closer. You can write whatever ending you want, Daniel, he said, his voice almost a whisper. But in real life, I don't lose. And just like that, I knew my carefully constructed, safe little world was about to burn. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan, those steady eyes, that quiet certainty. The problem wasn't that he was real. The problem was that part of me wanted him to be exactly as I'd written him. Dangerous, possessive, the kind of alpha who would burn the world just to keep me close. But that was fiction, and fiction ends. The next morning, a knock on my door pulled me out of my thoughts. He stood there again, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "We're going for a drive," he said. "Do I get a say in this?" "Not really." He led me to a black pickup that looked like it had seen both better and worse days. The drive took us out of Brookhaven, past rolling hills and fields where the leaves had turned to fire. Eventually, he pulled into a gravel lot overlooking a wide, shimmering lake. "This is where you wrote that scene," he said. My throat went dry. "How do you?" "I remember it," he said simply. "Not from reading, from living it." I stared at him, the autumn wind cutting cold between us. "Ethan, are you saying we've met before?" "Not exactly," he said, stepping closer. "More like we were meant to, and somewhere, somehow, the story found its way into you before it found me. It was insane. It was impossible. But as he cupped my face in his hands, the heat of his touch sparking something deep in my chest, I believed him. My Omega instincts, those I'd trained myself to ignore, were screaming that this was exactly where I belonged. But belonging had a price. "You don't know what you're asking," I whispered. "An alpha and an unmated Omega in this town? They'll tear us apart." His jaw tightened. "Let them try." The weeks that followed were chaos. Word got out fast. Brookhaven gossip worked faster than the internet. Everywhere we went, eyes followed us. Old friends stopped calling. My boss at the bookstore started giving me fewer shifts. Ethan, though, never flinched. He showed up at the diner with my favorite coffee without asking. He fixed the loose railing on my porch without a word. He kept showing up until I stopped pretending I didn't wait for him. One night, the storm hit literally and figuratively. Rain hammered against my windows, and Ethan burst through the door, dripping wet, eyes burning. "They're saying I forced you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Say the word, Daniel, and I'll make them regret it." My heart twisted. "I don't care what they say. I care about you." Something in his expression broke then, like a man who'd been holding himself together for far too long. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands gripping my face, his mouth crashing against mine. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, desperate, like he was trying to rewrite every lie the world had told about us. We didn't speak much after that. We didn't need to. Every touch was a sentence. Every breath was a promise. By the time the storm passed, I knew there was no going back. Spring came slowly to Brookhaven. By then, the whispers had died down. People had new scandals to chew on. Ethan and I had settled into something that wasn't quite quiet, but was ours. One morning, I found him on the porch, sipping coffee, watching the sun rise. He handed me a mug and didn't look at me when he said, "I bought a ring." I froze. "You what?" "You wrote about a wedding we never had," he said. "I figured we should fix that." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "You're ridiculous. And you're mine," he said, finally looking at me. In every version of the story, the truth was, I'd been terrified that loving him in real life would hurt more than it did in fiction. But standing there, wrapped in the golden light of a new morning, I realized something. Maybe the book had been a beginning, not an ending. Maybe I hadn't written his story at all. Maybe I'd just been waiting for him to walk into mine. We didn't have a grand ceremony. Just us, a few friends, and the lake where our worlds had first collided. He slid the ring onto my finger, his hand trembling just enough for me to notice. "You win," I whispered. He smiled. "No, Daniel. We do." And for the first time, I knew the ending wouldn't need rewriting. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.